The wind clawed at the wooden cabin, slipping through the cracks like a thief. Every gust rattled the shutters and moaned across the desolate prairie, carrying with it the smell of dust, sagebrush, and distant smoke. Inside, Hannah Whitlock sat, alone at the table, a single lantern burning low, its flame wavering as if frightened of the night itself. She had been a widow only 3 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. Her husband's grave lay out by the cottonwoods, a mound of earth freshly turned, the wooden cross she'd hammered into place already leaning in the restless wind. She told herself she had no tears left, yet grief still sat like a stone in her chest, heavy and unmovable. Each night she expected his boots on the porch, his voice calling her name. Each night the silence reminded her of what the earth had stolen back. The silence broke. The dog outside, Old Duke, growled once a low, uncertain sound, and then went silent, too silent. Hannah stiffened, her needle pausing mid-stitch. Her ears strained, catching the crunch of heavy steps in the yard. Not the easy gait of a rancher or a passing cowboy. No, these steps were slow, measured, predatory. The lantern flickered. The shadows shifted. And then he filled the doorway. At first, she thought he was a ghost, some spirit come to claim her. A man's frame blocked the moonlight, tall and broad-shouldered. His hair fell in long black strands, catching faint glimmers of silver in the dark. Across his jaw stretched a scar, puckered and cruel, as if carved by fire or blade. His chest rose and fell like a man who had walked for days without rest, and his eyes were black as obsidian, glittering with something she couldn't name. Her breath caught. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. When he spoke, his voice rumbled low, guttural, edged with a growl that seemed to crawl straight into her bones. Your body is mine until I have my child. The words dropped like stones into a still pond, shattering the air. Hannah's fingers fumbled for the rifle leaning against the wall, her late husband's Winchester. She pulled it to her lap, hands trembling. The man's gaze flicked to it, then back to her, unblinking. He didn't flinch. He didn't charge. He simply stood there, breathing hard, as if his own words had cost him something. Get out. She managed, her voice a hoarse whisper. This is my home. He stepped inside. One heavy boot pressed onto her floorboards, creaking under the weight. The lantern's glow caught the edges of his bare arms muscles roped with scars, tribal. Ink curling across his skin like black fire. His chest glistened with sweat. Dirt clung to him as though he had wrestled with the very earth itself. My name is Tarak, he said, voice still low, carrying the weight of ancient rage. I am son of Chief Nahoka. I have no people left. No woman, no child. They are gone, taken by fire and guns. The rifle shook in Hannah's grip. Her heart hammered in her ribs like a wild drum. She thought of running. She thought of shooting. But her eyes stayed locked on his. There was something in them beyond threat. Pain, fury, and something deeper still, desperation. Her throat went dry. Why me? For the first time, his gaze dropped. His jaw clenched tight, veins rising in his neck. He seemed to wrestle with the words before letting them out like stones dragged from his chest. Because your husband gave guns to the men who killed my wife. My child, the spirits demand I live. They demand my bloodline continues, and you, widow of his hand, must carry it. Hannah's knees weakened. The rifle nearly slipped from her grasp. The cabin spun, the air thick and heavy. She wanted to scream at him, curse him, deny him, but her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Tarak stepped fully into the room now, the door banging shut behind him with the wind. The lantern flame trembled, throwing their shadows huge against the walls. He set his knife down on the table, its blade catching the light, then lowered himself cross-legged to the floor. his head bowed, his hair falling like a curtain. "I will not touch you tonight," he murmured, "but I will not leave. Your fate is bound to mine. Until my child lives, your body is mine." The words hung heavy in the smoke-stained cabin. Outside, the wind screamed like a wounded thing. Inside, Hannah sat frozen, rifle clutched to her chest, staring at the stranger who had entered her life like a storm. She should have hated him. She should have feared him. And she did. But as his breath slowed and his head remained bowed, a flicker of something else, something she dared not name, stirred inside her. And in that moment, she knew her world would never be the same again. The morning came gray and cold, pressing low clouds across the prairie. Hannah hadn't slept a moment. Her hands still trembled from the night before, but the rifle across her lap remained untouched, her finger never once daring the trigger. Apache warrior hadn't moved from where he'd settled on her cabin floor. Tarak sat cross-legged like a statue, his back straight, his head bowed, strands of black hair falling like curtains across his scarred face. The lantern had burned out hours ago, yet even in the weak dawn light he seemed carved from stone, unyielding, unmoving, a piece of the wilderness itself that had forced its way into her home. Hannah's eyes ached from staring at him, waiting for a lunge, a strike, some act of violence, but none came. He only breathed, deep and steady, as if the weight of the world rested on each exhale. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she whispered, "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" Slowly, Tarak lifted his head. His eyes found hers, dark as obsidian, carrying something beyond threat, something she almost mistook for sorrow. "I told you," he said in a voice that rumbled low, gravel and storm. "Your body is mine until my blood lives again." Her jaw tightened. Anger rose through her fear, sharp and hot. "You think I'll let you touch me? You think I'll carry your child just because you say so?" He did not flinch. Instead, he reached for the leather pouch at his side and drew out a necklace. The cord was singed black, the beads cracked, the tiny carved shell hanging from it scorched by fire. He held it in both hands as if it were a newborn. His voice cracked when he spoke. "My wife wore this," Tarak said. "She was heavy with my child when the bluecoats came. They set fire to the lodge." She screamed, but I was too far. I ran until my lungs burned. His throat closed, his jaw clenched, and his eyes flicked away as if ashamed of the memory. "I pulled this from the ashes. Her bones, my child's bones." He stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than gunmetal. Hannah swallowed. Hard, her heart thudding. "You're lying," she whispered. Though her voice lacked conviction, his gaze snapped back to her, sharp as an eagle's. "Do you think I want this? To force my blood into a woman who hates me?" "No." He rose to his feet in one smooth motion, towering over her. His muscles flexed in the dim light, tribal jewelry clinking softly against his skin. "But the spirits do not care what I want. They say my line must live. If it does not, I am cursed." "My people are cursed." Hannah gripped the rifle tighter. "And what of me? Do you think the spirits care about me, my body, my life?" His eyes narrowed, his voice deepening into a growl. "Your husband gave guns to the soldiers. They killed my people with those guns. Your life is already marked with their blood. You are not innocent, widow." The words sliced through her like knives. She thought of her late husband, of the deals he made with men in uniform, of the money that built their small ranch. She had turned her eyes away, never asking questions, never wanting to see the stain of blood on silver coins. And now the cost of that silence stood before her. Her throat burned, but she forced herself to speak. "If you touch me, Tarak, I'll kill you. I swear it." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, his voice a growl laced with something almost broken. "Then kill me now, Hannah. Put your rifle to my chest and end me. But if I die, the spirits will take you too." You will hear their cries in your sleep. You will never escape." Her hand shook so hard the rifle rattled. She lifted it, pressing the barrel to his chest. His heart beat strong beneath the steel. He did not move. He did not blink. His eyes bore into hers, steady, waiting. Hannah's finger hovered on the trigger. Her whole body screamed at her to pull, to end this nightmare. But her finger would not move. The weight of his sorrow, his pain, the raw truth in his eyes, it pinned her down harder than any hand could dot at last, with a sob that shook her, too. Her bones, she lowered the rifle. Tarak's jaw tightened, his breath hissing out slow. He stepped back, sliding the charred necklace over his neck. The beads rested against his scarred chest like a brand. "You are bound to me now," he said. "Not by my hands, by your choice. By the spirits." Hannah shook her head violently. "I chose nothing." But even as she spoke, she knew she was lying. She could have pulled the trigger. She hadn't. And in that truth, she felt the ground of her old life crumble beneath her feet. The night pressed heavy against the cabin walls, thicker than any storm Hannah had known. The prairie wind keened like a restless spirit, slipping through cracks in the timber, making the lantern flame shiver on the table. Hannah sat rigid in her chair, the rifle never leaving her lap, her finger brushing the trigger, though her hand trembled so violently she thought it might go off without her meaning it. Across the room, Tarak paced. His steps were steady, slow, like a wolf cage too long. Each creak of the floorboard set Hannah's nerves on edge. He did not speak, did not even glance at her, only moved back and forth, his bare chest gleaming faintly in the lantern glow. His long black hair swung with each turn, catching the light, his tribal jewelry clinking softly, like faint reminders of the life he had lost. Every time she thought she understood him, killer, invader, savage, his silence unsettled her more than any threat could. His presence filled the cabin until the air itself seemed too tight to breathe. Hannah swallowed hard. Her throat was raw from holding back words, but at last she let them spill. "You think keeping me here will give you peace?" she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You think forcing me to carry your child will silence the screams of your wife and your people?" Tarak stopped mid-step. His head turned, his profile sharp in the lantern light, shadows deepening the scar across his jaw. For a long moment he did not answer. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to sit by the fire, cross-legged once again, his back straight as a spear. His voice came low, nearly a whisper, but every word seemed carved from stone. "The screams never leave," he said. "When I close my eyes, I hear them. When I wake, I see fire. My wife's arms reached for me. My child's cries were swallowed by smoke. There is no peace. Not for me." Hannah's chest tightened. She wanted to feel hatred, only hatred, but sorrow twisted its way through. She had known loss her husband lowered into the earth, the echo of loneliness in every room, but she had not watched him burn. She had not smelled the flesh of her family turned to ash. Still, she clenched her jaw. "And so you put that weight on me? You make me your answer?" His gaze lifted, dark and unyielding, yet not cruel. "The spirits demand it, not me. Without a child, my line ends, my people end. Their voices fade into the dust. I cannot let that happen." She hugged the rifle tighter, shaking her head. "You talk about spirits, Tarak, but what about me? I am flesh and blood. I am a woman, not a vessel for your grief." The fire cracked, spitting sparks. Tarak's eyes softened, if only a fraction. "You think I do not see you? You sit with steel in your hands and fear in your eyes, but you do not run. You could have killed me. You did not. The spirits chose you, Hannah Whitlock, because your strength is greater than your hate." The words cut deep, not because she believed him, but because some buried part of her wanted to. She had lowered the rifle when she could have pulled the Trigger. Why? She had told herself it was fear, that she was not brave enough. But his words clawed at something else, something she could not name. Her body ached from tension, her eyes burning from the strain of holding his gaze. She turned away, whispering, "I don't want this." "I do not want this either," Tarak said, and for the first time, there was a break in his voice, a rawness that sounded almost human. "But the land takes what it wants. Fire takes what it wants. The spirits take what they want. We are left with what remains." Silence fell heavy again. Hannah shifted in her chair, unable to stop glancing at him as he closed his eyes, his broad chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed both exhausted and vigilant. For hours, the cabin held only the crackle of fire, the moan of wind, and the steady breathing of the man who had turned her life into a nightmare. She thought of slipping out the back door, running into the night, but the image of soldiers or wolves or worse, his dark shadow following, froze her where she sat when dawn crept gray and thin through the shutters. Hannah blinked at the sight of Tarak. He was no longer pacing. He was kneeling by the door, his head bowed low, whispering words in Apache she did not understand. His scarred hands pressed against the earth as though begging it for mercy. For a moment, he did not look like a captor or a beast. He looked like a man broken open by grief, held together only by prayer. And though Hannah hated herself for it, a shiver of something other than fear ran through her. The prairie morning was bitter with frost, and the wind whispered through the skeletal remains of last season's grass. Hannah Whitlock's hands were numb around the rifle, but she did not lift it. Not yet. Her eyes scanned the horizon, watching. For the distant dust clouds that signaled riders, Tarak had moved silently to the far corner of the cabin, crouched near the broken window, listening. The muscles in his bare arms tensed with each sound, his tribal jewelry clinking softly, catching what little sunlight filtered through the clouds. His long black hair fell over his face as he pressed his palm to the cold wood, tracing its grain. Like he sought guidance from the earth itself. "They're coming," he said quietly, voice low but sharp enough to slice the tension. "Bluecoats, soldiers hunting my people. They will not stop at me." Hannah's stomach knotted. Her eyes darted to the horizon again. Sure enough, the glint of sunlight off metal, the rhythmic pounding of hooves, and the distant shouts confirmed his words. She swallowed hard, gripping the rifle tighter. "We have to hide you," she whispered. "If they find you here, they'll kill you and me too?" Tarak's gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. "I trust the land to hide me. I trust the spirits." His words hung like smoke in the cold morning air. Then he added, softer, "But you, I trust you to survive." Hannah shivered. Trust. The word felt foreign between them, yet the weight of it pressed down harder than fear. Her heart raced. She didn't want to betray him, yet every instinct screamed at her to run, to save herself and leave the stranger to his fate. Outside, the soldiers drew closer, their shouts growing sharper, the metallic clatter of rifles echoing. Across the frozen canyon, Hannah moved instinctively, pulling Tarak behind the cabin's stacked woodpile, their bodies pressed close. His bare chest was warm against hers, muscles tense beneath her trembling hands. She could feel the pounding of his heart, almost in rhythm with her own. "Stay low," he murmured. "Do not speak." Hannah nodded, biting her lip as the first shadow of a soldier passed the cabin window. The man outside, a young recruit, barely out of his teens, stopped, peering into the cabin. Hannah held her breath, and Tarak's hand hovered near her shoulder, ready but not touching. His dark eyes flicked to hers, and in that silent moment, she understood something she hadn't yet admitted. He was her shield, not just her captor. The soldier moved on, but more followed, circling the cabin. Tarak's muscles coiled like springs, his bare skin catching the light with a sheen of frost and sweat. He muttered in Apache under his breath, Words Hannah could not understand. She sensed the power behind them, a call to the spirits, a plea for protection. Hours passed like this, the wind screaming outside, soldiers scouring the land. At one point, a rider's boot slipped in the mud outside, and Hannah flinched. Tarak's hand brushed her back, strong and steady, holding her in place without breaking the tension. "Do not move," he growled softly. "Do not breathe louder than the wind." Eventually, the soldiers left, their voices fading into the canyon like smoke. Hannah sank to the floor, shivering, eyes wide. Tarak remained crouched, still tense, until the last echo of hooves disappeared. Then he straightened slowly, letting out a long breath that seemed to carry months of grief and fear. "You saved me," he said finally, voice raw. "The spirits see you now as protector, not prey. Remember that." Hannah shook her head, still clutching her rifle. "I don't know if I saved you, or if you saved me," she whispered. Her voice trembled, unsure if she admitted fear, gratitude, or something more complicated. Tarak's dark eyes softened ever so slightly. "Perhaps both," he murmured. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the canyon cliffs glowed faintly in the wan light. "But the land is not quiet yet. Danger lingers. You must be ready." Hannah nodded, though she did not know what ready meant in a world suddenly torn between grief, fear, and the raw power of a man who had stepped into her life like a storm. The frost outside did nothing to cool the fire that had ignited between them. A volatile mixture of fear, respect, and something neither dared name. As the sun climbed, the cabin settled into uneasy silence. Both knew that the threat of soldiers was only the beginning. The true struggle, Hannah realized, would be surviving Tarak himself and the destiny that bound them together. The canyon yawned before them, jagged cliffs rising like silent sentinels, painted in shades of blood red and ochre. Tarak led Hannah down a narrow path, each step careful on the frost-hardened earth. The wind whistled through the crevices, carrying the scent of pine sap, dust, and distant fire. For a moment, Hannah felt the pulse of the land beneath her feet, as if the canyon itself were alive, watching their every move. "You will not leave here," Tarak said, voice low and steady. His dark eyes, sharp as an eagle's, scanned the rim of the cliffs for any sign of pursuit. "Not yet. The soldiers may come. The spirits will not allow harm while you are with me." Hannah's hands trembled around the rifle she had brought, though she had not raised it once since sunrise. "I won't be a part of this," she said, her voice wavering. "I will not carry your child. I will not—" Her words died in her throat as he stopped and turned toward her, the wind whipping his long black hair into his face. "You think you have a choice?" He growled, his voice low and dangerous. "The spirits have chosen. I am their instrument. And you?" He stepped closer, the muscles of his bare chest tense, corded with power. "You are the vessel." Hannah's heart hammered. She wanted to recoil, to throw him back, to run from this man who had become both nightmare and enigma, but she could not. Her legs betrayed her, rooted to the dusty canyon floor, and in that moment she saw something else, something raw and almost human. In his obsidian eyes, fear. Not of her, but of the spirits, of the past, of the loss that had carved him into this warrior of shadow and rage. Tarak knelt suddenly, planting both hands in the dirt. He pressed his forehead to the ground, murmuring words in Apache. Hannah did not understand them, but she felt their weight in her bones. The wind seemed to bend toward him, carrying his whispered prayers into the canyon walls. When he lifted his head, he did not immediately look at her. His dark gaze swept the canyon, like a hawk, ensuring no danger approached. Then he finally met her eyes. "You will carry my child," he said, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. "Not because I desire it, but because the line of my blood must survive. You are mine in this, only in this." Hannah's chest tightened. Rage, fear, and disbelief collided inside her. She lifted the rifle instinctively, but the movement was slow, weighed down by hesitation. Tarak's eyes softened, ever so slightly, as if he understood the storm inside her. "Do not raise it against me," he said. "I do not wish to fight you." The canyon around them was silent except for the wind and the occasional cry of a sigh. Distant hawk. Dust swirled around their boots, and the cliffs cast long, jagged shadows over the narrow path. Tarak stepped closer, bare feet crunching on gravel, and placed a hand on her shoulder, not roughly, but firmly, marking the boundary between resistance and surrender. "You are bound to me, Hannah," he said, voice low but unyielding. "Not by my hands, but by the will of the spirits. You may fight, scream, or curse me, but this bond is older than either of us. It cannot be undone." Hannah's knees shook. Her fingers clenched around the rifle stock, yet she did not lift it. The wind caught her hair, whipping it across her face, and she blinked rapidly. She wanted to hate him, to despise him, to flee into the canyon and leave him behind. Yet, in the raw, unguarded look he gave her, the mix of grief, desperation, and reverence, she felt something stir inside her that terrified her more than fear itself. Tarak lowered his head again, pressing the charred necklace against his chest. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "This marks you. This marks our bond. The spirits see it. The canyon sees it. The earth itself will remember." Hannah swallowed hard, tears prickling her eyes. She did not speak. She could not. The weight of the canyon, of the wind, of Tarak's presence, pressed down on her, leaving her breathless, suspended between defiance and inevitability. For hours they remained there, the sun slipping behind the cliffs, casting the canyon into shadows that deepened with each passing minute. Hannah realized with a shiver she could not explain that her life had changed. Forever. The land, the warrior, and the spirits had chosen their path, and she was caught in the current dot, and in that moment she understood. This was no longer about fear alone. It was about survival, about legacy, and about a bond forged in fire, wind, and the red dust of the canyon, one that would not easily be broken. Winter had settled over the prairie like a gray blanket. Frost clung to the remnants of last season's grass, and the wind cut through Hannah's simple dress, making her shiver despite the cabin's small fire. Days had stretched into weeks since the canyon, and still Tarak had not left her side. He moved quietly through the cabin, bare-chested, muscles taut under the strain of vigilance. His tribal jewelry of bone, beads, and leather straps rattled softly as he adjusted firewood, or peered through broken shutters. Hannah sat at the table, hands pressed to her swollen belly. Her breaths came shallow, and every flutter inside her reminded her of the life growing there, his life, his blood, and her own entwined. The weight of it pressed on her chest, as heavy as fear and hope combined. "They are coming," Tarak whispered one morning, his obsidian-dark eyes scanning the horizon. "Soldiers. Or worse, men who hunt what they do not understand." Hannah's grip tightened on the rifle. "We've hidden well so far," she said, though doubt laced her. "Words. We can't hide forever." Tarak knelt by the window, hands pressed against the sill, listening to the wind and distant sounds. "The land hides me as it hides the wind," he said softly. "But you must be ready." His gaze shifted to her, dark and intense, yet softened by concern. "The child carries the line of my people. It is not only your burden, it is our shield, our hope." Hannah's throat tightened. "I didn't choose this, Tarak. I never asked for any of this." His bare hands reached across the table, brushing hers. She flinched, but did not pull away. "Nor did I," he admitted. "I do not desire this path, yet the spirits—" They do not ask what we desire. They only demand what must be. The first distant hooves thundered over frozen soil. Both froze. Outside, a small group of riders emerged from the haze, rifles gleaming in the pale light. Tarak's muscles tensed like springs. He stepped forward, placing himself between Hannah and the cabin door. "If they harm her," he growled, low and guttural, "they face me." Hannah's fingers went white on the rifle. Fear surged, but beneath it, a strange surge of certainty. He was more than a captor, more than a stranger. He was her protector, raw and unyielding, and she was caught in the current of something far larger than either of them. The riders slowed as they approached the cabin. One of them, likely their leader, squinted at the narrow windows, uncertain. Tarak stepped fully into the doorway, the weak firelight and frost dust catching on his muscular, scarred chest and long black hair. The tribal jewelry clinked softly as he shifted his stance. Hannah could feel the power radiating from him, the kind of strength that made men pause. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice a low growl that carried across the yard. "Not if you value your life." The soldiers hesitated, unsure, and eventually turned, murmuring orders as they withdrew into the distance. Hannah exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she sank to the floor. Tarak moved to kneel beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the other resting lightly on her belly. "Child is safe," he murmured. "For now." His dark eyes softened as they lingered on her. "And you are safe, Hannah, for now." She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, voice raw. "I don't know if I can bear. A child for a man I barely know, a man I feared." Tarak's hands tightened gently on hers. "Fear and love are not always separate," he said. "The child will change us both. It will give us purpose beyond grief, beyond vengeance. It will be our bond to the spirits and to life itself." Hannah swallowed hard, feeling a flutter inside her belly as if the child responded to his words. For the first time, the terror that had dominated her life in recent weeks softened, replaced by something fragile but undeniable. Hope. The wind outside screamed against the cabin, rattling the shutters. But inside, Hannah and Tarak remained together, bound by fear, grief, and the promise of new life. The world beyond the walls was dangerous, relentless, and unforgiving, but here, in the small flicker of firelight, they had a chance to survive, to endure, to begin again. And in that quiet, tense moment, Hannah realized that the child growing within her was not just a symbol of Tarak's past or the spirits. It was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted, a life forged from tragedy, survival, and a bond that might yet endure. The wind howled outside the cabin like a living thing, rattling the shutters and pushing frost across the floorboards. Hannah Whitlock gripped the edge of the table, sweat clinging to her brow, each breath shallow and ragged. The labor pains had begun before dawn, sharp as knives, tearing through her, relentless and unforgiving. Tarak knelt beside her, his bare chest glistening with sweat, muscles coiled and taut, his long black hair damp and sticking to his scarred face. The tribal jewelry of bone, beads, and leather straps rattled softly with each tense movement. "Breathe." "Hannah," he urged, his voice low, steady, almost soothing, despite the storm raging outside and within her. His obsidian eyes burned with intensity, not of anger, but of a fierce determination. "The child will come. You are strong. You must be strong." Hannah gasped, clutching his forearm, nails digging into his skin. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice trembling. Fear, pain, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. I never wanted any of this." Tarak's jaw tightened. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "None of us choose the path the spirits set. But your strength brought you here. Your courage brought us both here. Now breathe, and fight with me. The cabin filled with the raw sound of labor, the creak of wooden floorboards, and the howling wind outside. Tarak moved with precision, fetching water, damp cloths, and whatever he could find to make the small room safe. His presence was constant, protective, and unyielding, a pillar of power and care. Hours passed, each wave of pain sharper than the last. Hannah's eyes, wide with fear, met Tarak's again and again, seeking reassurance. He never faltered. His voice never wavered. Even when exhaustion made her collapse against him, he held her upright, murmuring encouragement and grounding her with his strength. Finally, a cry cut through the cabin, raw and fierce. Hannah's head fell back as tears streamed down her face. Tarak's lips parted, and he let out a breath he had been holding for hours. He lifted the newborn from her trembling arms, a small, wailing child, swaddled in the rough cloth he had. Brought the baby's dark eyes opened, blinking up at the world for the first time. Tarak pressed the child gently to his chest, brushing back Hannah's hair. "It is ours," he whispered, voice soft, almost reverent. "The line lives. The spirits see it. You see it, Hannah? We have survived. Together." Hannah looked at him, at the child, at the cabin and the winter world beyond, and for the first time in weeks, a spark of peace touched her soul. She wanted to scream with relief, to laugh, to weep, but all she could do was press her cheek against Tarak's arm, feeling the heat of his body, the heartbeat that had become as familiar and steady as her own. "You were right," she admitted, voice trembling. This bond, it's more than fear or pain. It's life." Tarak's dark eyes softened, and he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And you were brave," he murmured. "You carried not just my child, but the hope of a future. You were never alone." Outside, the prairie stretched wide and cold, untouched by men. Wind and frost the only witnesses to the birth of a new life. Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight, warmth, and the presence of family born from tragedy, grief, and the will of the spirits. Hannah held the child close, the soft warmth against her chest anchoring her to this moment. Tarak rested his hand over hers, the silence between them speaking volumes. They had survived storms, soldiers, grief, and the cruelty of the world, but in the end, they had each other and the life they had created. For the first time in weeks, Hannah allowed herself to hope. Not for safety, not for the past, not for escape, but for what was to come. For a future forged by love, strength, and survival. And as the wind howled outside, the cabin stood silent, warm, and full of life, carrying the promise that the line of Tarak's people and the bond that had saved them both would continue unbroken in the child they now held together.